Hi, everybody. This is Allison from Allykatkreations. How are you? Please like, share, and subscribe if you haven't done so already. And I want to wish everybody a happy and very Merry Christmas for those who celebrate. I hope everybody gets what they want or worked really hard for. If you get anything from my work, a connect the dot, a mind-blowing moment, that was yesterday's reading. A new author to explore, a new book to read, please consider supporting my work. All the info is in the description box below the video. The Secret Teachers of All Ages, Manly P. Hall. The Hiramic legend. We're already starting on a good start here with my projection. Do apologize. You know me. Are we ready? Then Solomon, the beloved of God, builder of the everlasting house and grand master of the lodge of Jerusalem, ascended the throne of his father David. He consecrated his life to the erection of a temple to God and a palace for the kings of Israel. David's faithful friend, Hiram, king of Tyre, hearing that a son of David sat upon the throne of Israel, sent messages of congratulation and offers of assistance to the new ruler. In his History of the Jews, Josephus mentions that copies of the letters passing between the two kings were then to be seen by both Jerusalem and Tyre. Despite Hiram's lack of appreciation for the 20 cities of Galilee, which Solomon presented to him upon the completion of the temple, the two monarchs remained the best of friends. Both were famous for their wit and wisdom. And when they exchanged letters, each devised puzzling questions to test the mental ingenuity of the other. Solomon made an agreement with Hiram of Tyre, promising vast amounts of barley, wheat, corn, wine, and oil as wages for the mansions and carpenters for Tyre, who were to assist the Jews in erection of the temple. Hiram also supplied cedars and other fine trees, which were made into rafts and floated down to the Sea of Joppa. Once they were taken inland by Solomon's workmen to the temple site. Because of his great love for Solomon, Hiram of Tyre sent also the Grand Master of the dynastic architects, Hiram Abif, a widow's son, who had no equal amount among the craftsmen of the earth. Hiram is described as being a Tyrian by birth, but an Israelish descent, and a second Bezalel, honored by his king with the title of father. The Freemason's Pocket Companion, published in 1771, describes Hiram as the most cunning, skillful, and curious workman that had ever lived, whose abilities were not confined to building alone, but extended to all kinds of work, whether in gold, silver, brass, or iron, whether in linen, tapestry, or embroidery, whether considered as an architect, statiary, founder, or designer, separately or together, he equally excelled. From his designs and under his direction, all the rich and splendid furniture of the temple and its several appendages were begun, carried on, and furnished. Solomon appointed him in his absence to fill the chair as deputy grand master, and in his presence, senior grand warden, master of work, and general overseer of all artistic, as well as those whom David had formerly procured for Tyre and Sidon, as those Hiram should now send. Modern Masonic writers differ as to the accuracy of the last sentence. Interesting. Although an immense amount of labor was involved in its construction, Solomon's Temple, in the words of George Oliver, was only a small building and very inferior in point of size to some of our churches. The number of buildings continuous to it and the vast treasures of gold and precious stones used in its construction consecrated a great amount of wealth within the temple area. In the midst of the temple stood the Holy of Holies, sometimes called the oracle. It was an exact cube, each dimension being 20 cubits, and exemplified the influence of Egyptian symbolism. The buildings of the temple group were ornamented with 1,453 columns of Parian marble, magnificently sculpted, and 2,906 pilasters decorated with capitals. There was a broad porch facing the east, and the sanctum sanctorum was upon the west. According to the tradition, the various buildings and courtyards could hold in all 300,000 persons, but the sanctuary and the Holy of Holies was entirely lined with solid gold plates encrusted with jewels. King Solomon began the building of the temple in the 4th year of his reign on what would be, according to the modern calculation, the 21st day of April, and finished in it the 11th year of his reign on the 23rd day of October. The temple was begun in the 480th year after the child of Israel had passed the Red Sea. Part of the labor of construction included the building of an artificial foundation on the brow of Mount Morah. The stones for the temple were hoisted from quarries directly beneath Mount Morah and were trued before being brought to the surface. The brass and gold ornaments for the temple were casted in molds in the clay ground beneath Succoth and Zeredah. The wooden parts were all finished before they reached the temple site. The building was put together consequently without sound and without instruments. All its parts fitted exactly without the hammer of contention, the axe of division, or any tool of mischief. Anderson's much discussed Constitutions of Freemasons, published in London 1723 and reprinted by Benjamin Franklin in Philadelphia in 1734, thus describes the division of the laborers engaged in the building of the everlasting house. But Dagon's temple and the finest structures of Tyre and Sidon could not be compared with the eternal God's temple at Jerusalem. There were employed about no less than 3,600 princes or master masons to conduct the work according to Solomon's directions, with 80,000 hewers of stone in the mountain or fellow craftsmen, 70,000 laborers in all, 153,600 besides the levy under Durham to work in the mountains of Lebanon by turns with the Sidonians, 30,000 being in all, 183,600. Daniel Sickles gives 3,300 overseers instead of 3,600. And lists 3 grand masters separately. The same author estimates the cost of the temple at nearly 4,000 millions of dollars. The Masonic legend of the building of Solomon's temple does not in every particular parallel to the scriptural version, especially in those portions relating to Hiram. According to the biblical account, this master workman returned to his own country. In the Masonic allegory, he is foully murdered. On this point, A.E. Waite, in his new Encyclopedia of Freemasonry, makes the following explanatory comment. The legend of the master builder is the great allegory of Masonry. It happens that his figurative story is grounded on the fact of a personality mentioned in Holy Scripture, but this historical background is of an accident and not the essence. The significance is in the allegory and not in any point of history which may lie beneath it. Karam, as master of the builders, divided his workmen into 3 groups, which were termed entered apprentices, fellow craftsmen, and master masons. To each division, he gave certain passwords and signs by their respective excellence, could be quickly determined. While all were classified according to their merits, some were dissatisfied, for they desired a more exalted position than they were capable of filling. At least 3 fellow craftsmen were more daring than their companions, determined to force Karam to reveal to them the password of the master's degree. Knowing that Karam always went into the unfinished sanctum sanctorum at high noon to pray, these ruffians, whose names were Jubila, Jubilo, and Jubilum, lay in wait for him, one at each of the main gates of the temple. Karam, about to leave the temple by the south gate, was suddenly confronted by Jubila, armed with a 24-inch gouge. Upon Karam's refusal to reveal the master word, the ruffian struck him on the throat with the rule, and wounded master then hastened to the west gate, where Jubilo, armed with a square, awaited him and made a similar demand. Again, Karam was silent, and second assassin struck him on the breast with the square. Karam thereupon staggered to the east gate, only to be met by Jubilum, armed with a maul. When Karam refused him the master's word, Jubilum struck the master between the eyes with the mallet, and Karam fell dead. Sorry, guys. Having mouth problems today. The body of Karam was buried by the murderers over the brow of the Mount Mora, and a sprig of archaea placed upon the grave. The murderers then sought to escape punishment for their crime by embarking for Ethiopia. But the port was closed. All 3 were finally captured, and after admitting their guilt, was duly executed. Parties of 3 were then sent out by King Solomon, and one of these groups discovered the newly made grave marked by the evergreen sprig. After the entered apprentices and fellow craftsmen had failed to resurrect their master from the dead, he was finally raised by the master mason with the strong grip of a lion's paw. To the initiated builder, the name Hiramic signifies my father, the universal spirit, 1 in essence, 3 in aspect. Thus, the murdered master is a type of cosmic martyr, the crucified spirit of good, the dying God, whose mystery is celebrated throughout the world. Among the manuscript of Dr. Sigismund Backstrom, the initiated Rosicrucian appears to follow exact from von Schwelling concerning the true philosophic nature of the Masonic cherubim. The original word, it's in Hebrew, charim, is a radical word consisting of 3 consonants, Cheth, Resh, and Mem. Cheth signifies Chama, the sun's light, the universal invisible cold fire of nature, attracted by sun, manifested into light, and sent down to us to every planetary body belonging to the solar system. Resh signifies Rach, spirit, air, wind, as being the vehicle which conveys and collects the light into numberless foci, wherein the solar rays of light are aggregated by a circular motion and manifested in heat and burning fire. Mem signifies Majem, water, humidity, but rather the mother of water, radical humidity, or a particular kind of condensed air. These 3 constitute the universal agent or fire of nature in one word, Karim, not Harim. Albert Pike mentions several forms of the name Karim, Kurim, Kurim, and Kuram. The letter ending is the sacred Hindu monosyllable, which may also be extracted from names of the 3 murderers. Pike further relates the 3 ruffians to a triad of stars in the constellation of Libra, and also calls attention to the fact that the Chaldean god Baal metamorphosized into a demon by the Jews, appeared to the name of each of the murderers, Jubilah, Jubilo, and Jubilum, to interpret the Hiramic legend. Requires familiarity with the Pythagorean and the Kabbalistic systems of numbers and letters, and also the philosophic and astronomic cycles of the Egyptians, Chaldeans, and Brahmins. For example, consider the number 33. The first temple of Solomon stood for 33 years in Palestine splendor. At the end of that time, it was pillaged by the Egyptian king Shishka, and finally, 588 BC, it was completely destroyed by Nebuchadnezzar, and the people of Jerusalem were led into captivity into Babylon. Also, King David ruled for 33 years in Jerusalem. The Masonic order is divided into 33 symbolic degrees. There are 33 segments in the human spinal column, and Jesus was crucified in the 33rd year of his life. The efforts made to discover the origin of Hiramic legend shows that while the legend in its present form is comparatively modern, its underlying principles run back to the remotest antiquity. It is generally admitted by modern Masonic scholars that the story of the martyred Hiram is based upon the Egyptian rites of Osiris, whose death was, and in resurrection figuratively portrayed, the spiritual death of man and his regeneration through initiation into the mysteries. Sharam is also identified with the Hermes through the inscription of the Emerald Tablet. From these associations, it is evident that the Hiram is to be considered as a prototype of humanity. In fact, he is Plato's idea archetype of man, as Adam, after the fall, symbolizes the idea of man degeneration. So Hiram, through his resurrection, symbolizes the idea of human regeneration. On the 19th day of March, 1314, Jacques de Molay, the last Grand Master of the Knights Templars, was burned at a priory erected upon the point of the islet of the Seine at Paris, where afterwards was erected the statue of King Henry IV. It mentioned as a tradition in some of the accounts of the burning, writes Jennings, that Molay, ere he expired, summoned Clement the Pope, who had pronounced the bull of admiration against the order and had condemned the Grand Master to the flames, to appear within 40 days before the Supreme Eternal Judge and Philip the King at the same awful tribunal within the space of a year. Both predictions were fulfilled. The close relationship between Freemasonry and the original Knights Templars has caused the story of Hiram to be linked with the martyrdom of Jacques de Molay. According to this interpretation, the three ruffians who cruelly slew their master at the gates of the temple because he refused to reveal the secrets of the order represented the Pope, the King, and the executioners. De Molay died maintaining his innocence and refusing to disclose the philosophical and magical arcana of the Templars. Those who have sought to identify Hiram with the murdered king, Charles I, conceived the Hiramic legend to have been invented for the purpose of Elias Ashmole, a mystical philosopher who was probably that purpose and member of the Rosicrucian fraternity. Charles was dethroned in 1647 and died on the block in 1649, leaving the Royalist Party leaderless. An attempt has been made to relate the term the Sons of the Widow, an application frequently applied to members of the Masonic order, to this incident in English history for the murder of her king. England became a widow and all Englishmen widows' sons. To the mystic Christian Mason, Hiram represents the Christ who in 3 days degrees raised the temple of his body from its earthly sepulchre. His three murderers were Caesar's agent, the state, the Sanhedrin, the church, and the incident populace, the mob. Thus considered, Hiram becomes the higher nature of man, and the murderers are ignorance, superstition, and fear. The indwelling Christ can give expression to himself in this world only through man's thoughts, feelings, and actions. Right thinking, right feeling, and right action. These are three gates through which the Christ power passes into the material world, there to labor in the erection of the temple of universal brotherhood. Ignorance, superstition, fear are the three ruffians through whose agencies the spirit of good is murdered and false kingdom, controlled by wrong thinking, wrong feeling, and wrong action, established in its stead. In the material universe, evil appears even victorious. In this sense, writes Daniel Sickles, the myth of the Tyrian is perpetually repeated in history of human affairs. Orpheus was murdered and his body thrown into the Hubris. Socrates was made to drink the hemlock in all ages. We have seen evil temporarily triumph in virtue and truth, calamited, persecuted, crucified, and slain. But eternal justice marches surely and swiftly through the world. The typhoons, the children of darkness, the plotters of crime, all the infinitely varied form of evils are swept into oblivion, and true and virtue for a time lay low, come forth clothed with diviner majesty and crowned with the everlasting glory. Very interesting. If, as there is ample reason to suspect, the modern Freemasonic order was profoundly influenced by, if not an actual outgrowth of Francis Bacon's secret society, its symbolism is undoubtedly permeated with Bacon's two great ideals, universal education and universal democracy. The deadly enemies of universal education are ignorance, superstition, and fear, by which the human soul is held in bondage to the lowest part of its own constitution. The errant enemies of universal democracy has ever been the crown, the tiara, and the torch. The Kharam symbolizes the ideal state of spiritual, intellectual, and physical emancipation, which has ever been sacrificed upon the altar of human selfishness. Harem is the beautifier of the eternal house, modern utilitarian. Goodness, I can't project this word. Utilitarianism. Sorry, guys. The teeth will fly out, just by FYI. They're loose. However, sacrifices the beautiful for the practical, in the same breath declaring the obvious lie that the selfishness, hatred, and discord are practical. Dr. Orville Ward Owen found a considerable part of the first 32 degrees of Freemasonic ritualism hidden in the text of the first Shakespeare folio. Masonic emblems are to be observed also upon the title pages of nearly every book published by Bacon. Sir Francis Bacon considered himself as a living sacrifice upon the altar of human need. He was obviously cut down in the midst of his labors, and no student of his new Atlantis can fail to recognize the Masonic symbolism contained therein. According to the observations of Joseph Fort Newton, the Temple of Solomon described by Bacon in the utopian romance was not a house at all, but the name of an ideal state. It is not true that the Temple of Freemasonry is also emblematic of condition of society. While, as before stated, the principles of the Hiramic legend are of the greatest antiquity, it is not impossible that its present form may be based upon incidents in the life of Lord Bacon, who passed through the philosophic death and was raised in Germany. In the older manuscript appears to state that the Freemasonic order was formed by alchemists and hermetic philosophers who had banded together themselves to protect their secrets against the infamous methods used by the various persons in wringing from them the secret of the gold making. The fact that the Hiramic legend contains an alchemical formula gives credence to this story. Thus, the building of Solomon's temple represents the consummation of the magnum opus, which cannot be realized without the assistance of Karim, the universal agent. The Masonic mysteries teach the initiate how to prepare within his own soul a miraculous powder of projection by which it is possible for him to transmute the base lump of human ignorance, perversion, and discord into an ignet of spiritual and philosophic gold. Sufficient similarity exists between the Masonic harem and the Kundalini of Hindu mysticism to warrant the assumption that harem may be considered a symbol also of the spirit fire moving through the sixth ventricle of the spinal column. The exact science of human regeneration is the lost key of Masonry, for when the spirit fire is lifted upon through the 33rd degrees or segments of the spinal column and enters into the dome chamber of the human skull, it finally passes into the pituitary body, Isis, where it invokes Ra, the pineal gland, and demands a sacred name. Operative Masonry, in the fullest meaning of the term, signifies the process by which the eye of Horus is opened. E.A. Wallace Bulge has noted that in some of the papyri illustrating the entrance of the souls of the dead into the judgment hall of Osiris, the deceased person had a pine cone attached to the crown of his head. The Greek mystics also carried a symbolic staff, the upper end being in the form of a pine cone, which was called the thyrus of Bacchus. I'm not going to get that out, guys. In the human brain, there is a tiny gland called the pineal body, which is the sacred eye of the ancients and corresponds to the third eye of Cyclops. Little is known concerning the function of the pineal body, which Descartes suggested more wisely than he knew might be the abode of the spirit of man. As its name signifies, the pineal gland is the sacred pine cone in man, the eye single, which cannot be opened until harem, the spirit fire, is raised through the sacred seals, which are called the seven churches in Asia. There is an oriental painting which shows 3 sunbursts. One sunburst covers the head, in the midst of which sits Brahma, with 4 heads, his body a mysterious dark color. The second sunburst, which covers the heart, solar plexus, and upper abdominal region, shows Vishnu sitting in the bosom of the lotus on a couch formed of the coils of the serpent of cosmic motion, its 7-hooded head forming a canopy over the god. The third sunburst is over the generative system, in the midst of which sits Shiva, his body a grayish white, and Ganges River flowing out of the crown of his head. This painting was the work of Hindu mystic who spent many years subtly concealing great philosophical principles within these figures. The Christian legends could be related also to the human body by the same method as the Oriental, for the arcane meaning hidden in the teachings of both schools are identical. As applied to Masonry, the 3 sunbursts represent the gates of the temple of which harem was struck, there being no gate in the north because the sun never shines from the north angle of the heavens. The north is the symbol of the physical because it's the relation to ice, crystallized water, and to the body, crystallized spirit. In man, the light shines toward the north, but never from it, because the body has no light of its own, but shines with the reflected glory of the divine life particles concealed within this physical substance. For this reason, the moon is accepted as a symbol of the man's physical nature. Harem is the mysterious, fiery, airy water, which must be raised through the 3 grand centers symbolized by the ladder, with the 3 rungs and sunburst flowers mentioned in the description of the Hindu painting. It must also pass upward by means of the ladder of the 7 rungs. The 7 plexuses proximate to the spine. The 9 segments of the sanctum and coccyx are pierced by 10 foramina, through which passes roots of the tree of life. 9 is the sacred number of man, and in the symbolism of the sacrum and coccyx, a great mystery is concealed. The part of the body from the kidneys downward was termed by the early Kabbalists the land of Egypt, into which the children of Israel were taken during captivity. Out of Egypt, Moses, the illuminated mind, as his name implies, led the tribes of Israel, the 12 faculties, by raising the brazen serpent in the wilderness upon the symbol of the Tau cross. Not only Purim, but the god-men of nearly every pagan mystery ritual are personifications of the spirit, fire, and the human spinal column. The astronomical aspect of the Hiramic legend must not be overlooked. The tragedy of Purim is enacted annually by the sun during its passage through the signs of the zodiac. From the journey of the sun through the 12 signs, writes Albert Pike, come the legend of the 12 labors of Hercules and the incarnations of Vishnu and Buddha. Hence came the legend of the murder of Purim, representative of the sun, by the three fellow crafts, symbols of the winter signs, Capricornus, Aquarius, and Pisces, who assailed him at the three gates of heaven and slew him at the winter solstice. Hence the search for him by the 9 fellow crafts, the other 9 signs, his finding, burial, and resurrection. Other authors consider Libra, Scorpio, and Sagittarius are the 3 murderers of the sun, inasmuch as Osiris was murdered by Typhoon, to whom was assigned the 30 degrees of the constellation of Scorpio. In the Christian mysteries, also Judas signifies the scorpion, and the 30 pieces of silver for which he betrayed his Lord represented the number of degrees in that sign, having been struck by Libra, the state, Scorpio, the church, and Sagittarius, the mob. The sun Purim is secretly born through the darkness by the signs of Capricorn, Aquarius, and Pisces, and buried over the brow of a hill, the vernal equinox. Capricorn has for its symbol an old man with the scythe in his hand. This is the father time, a wayfarer who is symbolized in Masonry as a straightening out the ringlets of a young girl's hair. In the Weeping Virgin, he considered a symbol of Virgo, and the father time was his scythe, a symbol of Capricorn. Sorry, guys. The interval of 90 degrees between the 2 signs will be found to correspond that occupied by 3 murderers. Esoterically, the urn containing the ashes of Purim represents the human heart. Saturn, the old man who lives at the North Pole and brings with him to the children of men a sprig of evergreen, the Christmas tree, is familiar to the little folks under the name of Santa Claus, for he brings each winter the gift of a new year. The martyred sun is discovered by Aries, a fellow craftsman, and at the vernal equinox, the process of raising him begins. This is finally accomplished by the Lion of Judah, who in ancient times occupied the position of the keystone of the royal ark of heaven. The procession of the equinoxes causes various signs to play the role of the murderers of the sun during the different ages of the world, but the principle involved remains unchanged. Such is the cosmic story of Purim, the universal benefactor, the fiery architect of the divine house, who carries with him to the grave that lost world, which when spoken raises all life to power and glory. According to Christian mysticism, when the lost word is found, it is discovered in a stable surrounded by beasts and marked by a star. After the sun leaves Leo, writes Robert Hewitt Brown, the days begin to grow unequivocally shorter as the sun declines toward the autumn equinox, to be again slain by the 3 autumnal months, lie down through the 3 winter ones, and be raised again by the 3 vernal ones. Each year, the great tragedy is repeated and glorious resurrection takes place. Purim is termed dead because the average individual, the cosmic creative forces, are limited in their manifestation to purely physical and correspondingly materialistic expression. Obsessed by his belief in the reality and permanence of physical existence, man does not correlate the material universe with the blank north wall of the temple. As the solar light symbolically is said to die as it approaches the winter solstice, so the physical world may be termed the winter solstice of the spirit. Reaching the winter solstice, the sun apparently stands still for 3 days, then rolling away the stone of winter, begins its triumph march north towards the summer solstice. A condition of ignorance may be likened to the winter solstice of philosophy, spiritual understanding to the summer solstice. From this point of view, initiation into the mysteries become the vernal equinox of the spirit, at which the Hiram in man crosses the realm of morality into that of eternal life. The autumn equinox is analogous to the mythological fall of man, at which time the human spirit descended into the realms of Hades by being immersed in the illusion of terrestrial existence. I don't like my teeth. I can't wait to get them plucked. In an essay on the beautiful, Platonius describes the refining effect of beauty upon the unfolding consciousness of man, commissioned to decorate the everlasting house. Karim Abif is the embodiment of the beautifying principle. Beauty is essential to the nature unfoldment of human soul. The mysteries held that man, in part at least, was the product of his environment. Therefore, they considered it imperative that every person be surrounded by objects which would invoke the highest and noblest sentiments. They proved that it was possible to produce beauty in life by surrounding life with beauty. They discovered the symmetrical bodies were built by souls continuously in the presence of symmetrical bodies, that noble thoughts were produced by minds surrounded by equal examples of mental nobility. Conversely, if a man were forced to look upon an ignoble or asymmetrical structure, it would arouse within him a sense of ignobility, which would provoke him to commit ignoble deeds. If an ill-proportioned building were erected in the midst of a city, there would be ill-proportioned children born in that community, and men and women gazing upon the asymmetrical structure will live in harmonious lives. Thoughtful men of antiquity realized that their great philosophers were the natural products of the aesthetic ideas of architecture, music, and art, established as the standards of the cultural systems of the time. The substitution of the discord of the fantastic for the harmony of the beautiful constitutes one of the great tragedies of every civilization. Not only were the savior gods of the ancient world beautiful, but each performed a ministry of beauty, seeking to effect man's regeneration by arousing within him the love of the beautiful. A renaissance of a golden age of fable can be made possible only by the elevation of beauty to its rightful dignity as all-pervading, idealizing quality in the religious, ethical, sociological, scientific, and political departments of life. The Dionysic architects were consecrated to the raising of their master spirit, cosmic beauty, from the sepulcher of material ignorance and selfishness by erecting buildings which were such perfect exemplars of symmetry and majesty that they were actually magical formulae by which was invoked the spirit of the martyred beautifier entombed within a materialistic world. In the Masonic mysteries, the triune spirit of man, the light of Delta, is symbolized by three grand masters of the Lodge of Jerusalem, as God is the pervading principle of three worlds, in each of which he manifests an active principle. So the spirit of man, partaking of the nature of divinity, dwells upon three planes of being: the supreme, the superior, and the inferior spheres of Pythagoreans. At the gate of the inferior sphere, the underworld or dwelling place of mortal creatures, stands the guardian of Hades, the three-headed dog Cerberus, who is analogous to the three murderers of the Hiramic legend. According to this symbolic interpretation of the triune spirit, Hiram is the third or incarnating part of the master builder who through all ages erect living temples of flesh and blood as shrines of the Most High. Hiram comes forth as a flower and cuts down. He dies at the gates of the matter. He is buried in the elements of creation, but like Thor, he swings his mighty hammer in the fields of space, sets the primordial atoms in motion, and establishes order out of chaos. As the potentiality of cosmic power within each human soul, Hiram lies waiting for men by the elaborate ritualism of life to transmute potentiality into divine potency. As the sense perceptions of the individual increases, however, man gains every greater control over his various parts, and the spirit of life within gradually obtains freedom. The three murderers represents the laws of the inferior world, birth, growth, and decay, which ever frustrate the plan of the builder. To the average individual, physical birth actually signifies the death of Hiram, and physical death with resurrection of Hiram. To the initiate, however, the resurrection of spiritual nature is accomplished without the intervention of physical death. In the curious symbols found the base of Cleopatra's Needle, now standing in the Central Park, New York, was interpreted by a being of first Masonic significance by S.A. Zola, 33, past Grand Master of Grand Lodge of Egypt. Masons' marks and symbols are found on the stones Lodge of Egypt of numerous public buildings, not only in England and on the continent, but also in Asia. In his Indian Masons, marks of the Mughal dynasty, Gorham describes scores of markings appearing on the walls of buildings, such as the Taj Mahal, the Jama Masjid, and the famous Masonic structure, the Qutb Minar. According to those who regard Masonry as an outgrowth of secret society of architects and builders, which for thousands of years formed a caste of master craftsmen, Karim Abif was the Tyrian Grand Master of the worldwide organization of artisans, with headquarters in Tyre. Their philosophy consisted of incorporating into the measurements and ornamentation of temples, palaces, mausoleums, fortresses, and other public buildings their knowledge of the laws controlling the universe. Every initiated workman was given a hieroglyphic with which he marked the stones, he true to show to all posterity that he thus dedicated to that supreme architecture of the universe, each perfected product of his labor. Concerning Mason's marks, Robert Freck, Gold, writes, "It is very remarkable that these marks are to be found in all countries, in the chambers of the Great Pyramid of Giza, on the underground walls of Jerusalem, in the Heracleum and Pompeii, of Roman walls and Grecian temples, in Hindustan, Mexico, Peru, Asia Minor, as well as on the great ruins of England, France, Germany, Scotland, Italy, Portugal, and Spain." From this viewpoint, the story of Karim may well represent the incorporation of divine secrets of architecture into the actual parts and dimensions of earthly buildings. The 3 degrees of the craft bury the Grand Master, the great archaeum, in the actual structure they erect after they have killing him with the builder's tools by reducing the dimensionless spirit of cosmic beauty to the limitations of concrete form. These abstract ideals of architecture can be resurrected, however, by the master mason who, by meditating upon the structure, releases therefrom the divine principles of architectonic philosophy incorporated and buried within it. Thus, the physical building is actually the tumor embodiment of the creative ideal, of which the material dimensions are but the shadow. Moreover, the Hiramic language may be legend. I don't know why I keep saying legend may be considered to embody the vicissitudes of philosophy itself. As institutions for the dissemination of ethical culture, the pagan mysteries were the architects of civilization. Their power and dignity were personified in Karim Abif, the master builder, but they eventually fell a victim to the onslaughts of the recurrent trio of state, church, and mob. They were desecrated by the state, jealous of their wealth and power, by the early church, fearful of their wisdom, and by the rabble or soldiery incited by both state and church. As Hiram were raised from his grave, whispers the master mason's word, which was lost through his untimely death. So according to the tenets of philosophy, the reestablishment or resurrection of the ancient mysteries will result in the rediscovery of the secret teaching, without which civilization must continue in a state of spiritual confusion and uncertainty. When the mob governs, man is ruled by ignorance. When the church governs, he is ruled by superstition, and when the state governs, he is ruled by fear. Before men can live together in harmony and understand, ignorance must be transmuted into wisdom, superstition into an illumined faith, and fear into love. Despite statements to the contrary, Masonry is a religion seeking to unite God and man by elevating its initiates to the level of consciousness, whereupon they behold with clarified vision the workings of the great architect of the universe. From age to age, the vision of a perfect civilization is preferred as the ideal for mankind. In the midst of their civilization shall stand a mighty university within both the sacred and secular sciences concerning the mysteries of life, will be freely taught to all who assume the philosophic life. Where creed and dogma will have no place, the superficial will be removed and only the essential be preserved. The world will be ruled by its most illumined minds, and each will occupy the position for which he is most admirably fitted. The great university will be divided into grades, admission to which will be through preliminary tests or initiations. Here, mankind will be instructed in the most sacred, the most secret, and the most enduring of all mysteries, symbolism. Here, the initiate will be taught that every visible object, every abstract thought, every emotional reaction is but the symbol of the eternal principle. Here, mankind will learn that the Quran truth lies buried in every atom of the cosmos, that every form is a symbol and every symbol the tomb of the eternal veridity. Through education, spiritual, moral, mental, and physical man will learn to release living truths from their lifeless coverings. The perfect government of the earth must be patterned eventually after the divine government by which the universe is ordered. In that day, when perfect order is reestablished with peace, universal, and good triumph, men will no longer seek for happiness, for they shall find it welling up within themselves. Dead hopes, dead aspirations, dead virtues shall rise from their graves, and the spirit of beauty and goodness, repeatedly slain by ignorant men, shall again be the master of work. Then shall sages sit upon the seats of the mighty, and the gods will talk with men. That is your Christmas Eve edition of Manly P. Hall's The Secret of All Ages, the Hiramic legend. Sending each and every one of you love and light. Please have an amazing holiday. Please be safe in those blizzard conditions, and most of the United States is really cold. Make sure you check on the animals, and make sure you check on those who are alone during this season, even if it's just a text message. People like me, who's a hermit, is alone, and it's nice to hear from family, friends, and whoever helps. So being that said, I hope everybody has an amazing holiday, and I'll see you on the next one.